From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Open Line.
Get it going and getting care when you have an event.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Open Line. Glad you're with us. It is Tuesday, September 8th. And today we are going to kind of shift gears a little bit. We're not talking about COVID per se. We're not talking about the election. We are talking about elder care law. Let's say you are caring for a parent who is aging, or you yourself is aging. What do you need to get in place as that process progresses? And it's always good to hear individual stories from people because we can all learn from that. And this is a chance to call in, talk with an elder care attorney about your situation and get some guidance. And happy to have with us Barbara Boone McGinnis joining us, as all of our guests do now via Zoom. And there is Barbara Boone McGinnis, all the way, I believe you're in Hendersonville, is that right?
New office on Windcrest Way.
Okay, great.
And by the way, I am loving this Zoom thing.
So you don't have to drive all the way here. You can just be on Zoom.
I don't have to drive.
Then you can just go home.
It's so efficient.
Right.
Now, I don't get to sit beside you or talk to Taylor or be there in the studio, and I miss all of that, but it's very convenient.
But the commute is a lot better.
Totally embracing the Zoom.
Fully embracing the Zoom, yeah.
Commute's a lot better.
Well, yeah, and we're kind of embracing the Zoom, too. I was asking Taylor tonight, when is the next time you think we'll have a guest come on here? And he thinks it may be a very long time. And it's actually a little easier now to book guests because it's harder for him to say no. We just say,
doesn't
all you have to do
matter
is
where
just,
they are,
just be in front of your computer and be on here. But good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here. You're obviously there in your office. And I always want to start with, so that people understand, I try to define it, but I think you're better. How do you define elder law? When we're talking about call in, share your stories, elder law
right.
attorney, what is elder law?
We think of elder law as a continuum of services from estate planning to asset protection planning as people start worrying about loss of control, loss of capacity, the high cost of long-term care, and then actually planning for that care, being proactive in organizing and arranging for care so they're receiving the right kind of care, all the way through nursing home placement and use of public benefits. We really do not touch a lot on things like Social Security disability. We don't do much with HUD housing or those sorts of things. But there are specialists for that.
And this past week, we were supposed to do this show last week, but sadly you called up and you said that your mom had died. And as I was asking you about that, you said you wanted to talk about it this week because it kind of highlights some of the things that you deal with there with elder law. But I guess share with us what has happened.
Right. Mom had passed away that last Tuesday morning after a prolonged illness, and I just wasn't in the right frame of mind to do the show last Tuesday night. But this past week has been an experience for me that unfortunately a lot of our families go through. And what do you do immediately after someone passes away? What are all those little steps? And some of the tips that I think would be helpful for someone in a similar situation, I used her cell phone, to see who were the closest friends that were staying in contact, calling her to know who were the first people I should call to notify, using maybe some of her photos to help as we're planning the service today. I spent about an hour and a half at the church planning service today. She did a pre-planned funeral, a prepaid funeral, but a lot of the details weren't planned. So I would tell someone that if you're in a position to start thinking that you may be immortal and one day need such a service, to not only prepay for the service, but go ahead and work with your family and your church service, your church people to help actually plan, picking out how detailed do you want your service to be in terms of scripture or songs or readings or who's going to be involved, because those are that's creating a memory, and those are really important decisions that could be very special to a family to plan together. Now, of course, in our area of specialty, we're also thinking about the estate plan side of it, not just the funeral planning side of it, but having documents like your will or your trust in place, making sure that there's beneficiary designations are correct, making sure things like bank accounts have payable on death designations or not, that it's thoughtfully considered and that you know what's right for you and your plan and to meet your goals. There's a lot of little details in between. I mean, her life was fairly simple towards the end. She did live in long-term care for quite some time, but if you now have a house that you have to take care of and secure, to make sure that perhaps you think about changing the locks, that you're changing, that you're protecting those assets inside the house. What and when do you tell utility companies? What about credit card? Like go through the wallet, what kind of credit cards? And I would say that for the people that are contemplating leaving loved ones behind, to not have now is not the time to be very secretive. We don't want to be doing a game of hide and seek to try to figure out what kind of assets are there. This is going to be hard enough from an emotional standpoint and hard enough from a process that's going to take weeks to months to deal with, that you don't need to play this little hide and seek game of where are the assets and what did mom or dad have. That was certainly not the situation in my family, but we do see that a lot with folks that come in and they're just not they're not ready to share.
Right. Maybe
you don't need to tell them what the bank balance is if you don't want to, but maybe you ought to at least give them a heads up of what banks in town should I be looking at,
Did you feel like that she had things in order, or was there some surprise in this past week that kind of came up?
Not personally, not for us. There was really not a surprise personally in terms of her assets, because Mom and I had worked together for many, many years, but certainly for the last 5 years when I'd served as her power of attorney and trustee, that, her assets and debts that I feel I had a pretty good handle on. Some of the other little details that people are going to have to think about in this time is forwarding mail, stopping mail, notifying the people that actually pay her, Social Security, other forms of pension or retirement money, making sure that they get proper notification. One thing that I was surprised about, and it was a pleasant surprise, was how fast the death certificates can come to you now. And it's the way they're doing things electronically. I mean, within 24 to 48 hours, there were real death certificates in hand that you could start notifying these companies with, because they all need a death certificate.
Right.
They're not just going to take a phone call.
Right. Yeah. Fascinating. And so what are you seeing, I guess, how often do you see in your office where people are not as prepared and some of the problems that causes?
Yeah, sadly, all too often. In the last week, we've had a family that delayed receiving medical care because they did not want to go to the hospital because of COVID fears. They didn't want to get out of their home, and they delayed receiving medical care and really had a disastrous result because of that. So not only did they not receive the right or the prompt medical care, they also did not have their estate plan and documents in place. So effectively died what we call intestate. Excuse me. So what that means is a person dies without a will or without a testamentary instrument. And the problem with that becomes it is then the state's plan for how an estate should be passed along instead of your plan. If they coincide, that's great. But, you've missed a real opportunity. I say adults, we struggle and try to be in control of our lives and the decisions that make our lives, shape our lives. And that if we do not put in place an estate plan that represents our wishes and our desires, kind of like shame on us, because, it's widely available, it's easily available. All kinds of reasons, I guess, why people do not do that. But there's probably really not a good one,
And it's really a gift to those that are left behind, obviously.
Oh, absolutely.
You're gone, but it's a gift for your children and family members who are left behind, and that's what you got to think about. And
it's just like, how hard do you want to make them work?
Right.
So we can talk.
We have some calls
more
already, and I always appreciate when people call in and share their story, because it helps us kind of know what people are thinking about and shares things on top of that. Let's go to Ricky here. Hello, Ricky.
Hello.
Go right ahead. What is on your mind?
Okay, I got a couple questions. Okay, one, if somebody's got money in the bank and their mom's sick and she's the only one on the account, and God forbid if something was to happen to her pass away, how would you go about getting the money out of the bank if ain't nothing on documents saying it's yours?
Okay. She's the only person on the account.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have another question?
Okay. How do you get, if you got an estate sale, say somebody left you something and you didn't know they left it until later on it clicked in, how do you find if anybody's left you anything?
Okay, interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, Ricky, so I guess you can take those.
We'll do those in order. How about that?
Okay.
So the whole idea of money in the bank, mom's alive, she's the only owner of that money now. Someone could, of course, assist her with management of that money using their power of attorney documents now during her life. If she's capable of naming either a payable on death, that makes that easy. But if not, a will is how you would get to it after death. Mom's will would say, I want the money in the bank divided among all of my children, or I want it to go to just this one child. And she would put that in her will, and that will would be probated. That's another real misconception about wills. If you do not have a testamentary instrument like a will and you pass away intestate, we use the state's plan to direct. But if you die with a will, you still have to be probated. Your will still has to be probated. Take the will to the court supervises administration of the estate, and it directs disposition. So that's how you would access.
I'll follow up with that. So if, let's say she has no will, and let's say she passes away and she's the only name on the account, and she has 2 kids, what happens to that account? How does the bank even know she has 2 kids?
Yeah. Then you actually would open the intestate estate in the probate court. One or both of the children would petition the court, usually through the use of an attorney. And once the letters of administration are issued, then you can go to the bank and say, we are the only 2 children. And by state law, if there's not a spouse, the only 2 children then are the ones that would be the recipients of those funds. Of course, the process is a little protracted in ensuring that creditors are settled, and that there are not any other next of kin, those sort of things. And it takes a few months to get it all done.
Okay. But there is a way that would naturally happen.
Oh yeah.
And the bank
it would find its home. It would just be harder to get there.
Does the bank? What obligation does the bank have? So they have a customer that dies. Do they need to find Next of kin? Does it just sit there if they
No,
don't?
the bank's going to sit there with it for a while. If no one shows up to claim it, either through a court process, it will be surrendered to unclaimed property.
Oh, wow.
So how do you know if somebody has left you assets? I think that was his next question, right?
Yes.
Something about assets. How would you know? You could search unclaimed property, but there's not and that's probably the best way to find out if you're expecting it. But, when you're going through the probate process, whether it's intestate or with a will, there is an obligation of the executor and the attorney to notify next of kin and any lawful heirs so that they receive notice of the proceeding, whether or not they're actually a beneficiary. Okay.
So
Does that make
helps.
sense?
Yes, it does.
Right. So, you would notice spouses, children, anyone that's in that bloodline that's next of kin, they would receive notice that the proceedings were occurring.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, Ricky, those are good questions.
Yeah.
And I bet a lot of people have questions like that. All right. That kind of sets the table. If you want to call in, there is the number, 615, there it is, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We will take a break and come back with your calls and questions right after this.